Welcome to Rauta and Sacrilegious Impalement Retrospective video. That is the story so far, now that the band has been here for quite some time. Not exactly an old band, but this time I think there was a reason to recap the whole career thus far, because in fact the band recently got reissued all their older releases, which I have here in pile. This is including their latest one, which I already reviewed a while back, a few months ago already. But because they're reissues, this was a good reason enough for me to go through the past a few times. Now, mind you, I have reviewed all the albums before Rauta years, because the band was, of course, existent back in the days, but a lot of these albums came out before Rauta was founded, only a couple of them being featured here. So because the band did a new album quite recently, and of course because they played some shows around the release date and all that stuff, and the reissues coming out, it was like a good reason for me to revisit the previous albums, some of the past, and of course give the new listen to the newer ones and figure out how the band has changed over the years, and of course go through the lyrics. Now, not all the releases have lyrics out there. I mean, the demo material, the lyrics are not included in, for example, Metal Archive site, nor I have him here. For example, the latest album, the new one, I had to read, of course, on the booklet, but luckily I happened to have it, so it made this all possible. Since this is quite a complex, whether do we go through the physical products first or straight dive into the Metal Archive site while I guide you through, this could go both ways, but I decided let's first go through each album. I will show you these reissues while I guide you a little bit through their music and all. Now, before albums, of course, there was a demo phase, and some of them have been piled up, compiled into this kind of compilation, First Three Nails. So this features older tracks by the band, and this Finnish black metal band has always put out quality. Now, since this is a demo compilation, there are no lyrics, which is part of the reason why I won't discuss any of them. It's just a kind of a simple back to basics kind of a release, which showcases their early material on one disc, and it's definitely worth having a go, because in fact already this demo material is good enough. I mean, it's a lot better as a compilation than many bands with their albums, so that's pretty interesting. Already these guys had, of course, experienced various bands, and then when they decided to go on album level, things got only better. And then we move to albums. Now, mind you, while the lineup has always been around Impaler, One Bastard, guitars and bass, the songwriter, the main guy of the band, some lineup changes have happened over the years, which is kind of a given with any kind of a band. And the more older you are, the more likely you are going to have them. I mean, of course, band age, not the fan perspective. For example, here you have Hellwind Inferion, who is later on mostly known for bands like Sargeist, but he's a man of many bands, and this is among the few ones he has been part of. And Sacrilegious Impalement, based in city of Lahti, is one of those bands that never changed its style too much. Of course, throughout the years there has been some evolution, for the lack of better word. I would rather say smaller changes. It's not like the band went through a big steps of evolution in style change and all that stuff, but of course, you know, bands tend to change over the years, and in that respect, Sacrilegious Impalement is no exception to the rule. Now, one thing that I was pointing out, or more like making notes, mental notes for myself, going through these lyrics, is that they are quite violent overall. They're quite dark and, of course, revolving around death and even topics like Satan and whatever. They have never been too straightforward. for me, that's not exactly a problem, but I sometimes feel like the band has been a little bit on toes, or maybe being more symbolic than when I was maybe expecting it to be. I mean, the music itself is quite violent, black metal, and has always been about the darker ends in so many ways. That is, there are lots of black metal bands, obviously, which tend to be more melodic or soft, versus whatever Sacrilegious Impalement has been about. So, for example, while Sacrilegious Impalement might be one of the most Swedish sounding bands coming from Finland, it has always been more on the violent side of things, more aggression and all that stuff. And as such, I think it's pretty interesting that the lyrics are not as straightforward indeed, but more going with metaphors and stuff like that. And I personally like when bands are kind of more brutal, more right in your face and all that stuff. Not saying these lyrics are bad, it's just more left for interpretation, which is something that a lot of people enjoy. But of course, and now this booklet is so stuck here that sometimes there is a risk of breaking the digipack. This actually unfolds nicely with a kind of a death angel type of stuff. Anyway, as I was saying, the band has always been with about spikes, blood, and of course challenging God, Christianity, Jesus, and faith for those who are into that kind of belief system. When it comes to me, I'm totally on the same page. I am always like, yeah, fuck those major religions. I mean, pretty much all the religions, in my opinion, are waste of human time and, well, waste of human resources in so many ways. But this is something that I find a little bit surprising indeed, because the band has not been attacking so directly God, Jesus, or religions in that place, while as the music indeed has been taking parts of, say, I mean, there could be links to bands like Marduk, or in some cases Watain comes to my mind. That's something that the band necessarily don't agree with me. I remember having this discussion with one bastard, and he was like, what the hell, we're never about Watain and so much, but there are similarities, not saying they're exactly the same. One thing is curious enough though, that the band has been changing over the years, or evolving, like said. I noticed it's more heavy metal has been seeping into the music over the years. And I'm not necessarily talking about the old school heavy metal so much as compared to whatever bands later on started using. I'm talking about like how Destroyer 666 is putting their melodies and heavy metal parts into extreme metal. Not exactly trashy, but kind of flirting with that. But talking about the kind of old school ways, which is very much present. Now, this is not as surprising as some people might think. After all, we're talking about people roughly my age who have grown up with heavy metal and even hard rock. That is, when those ideas start to seeping into your brain, it's kind of a natural to let that come out through the music, even if you're playing, in this case, black metal. So whether we're talking about pure blood black metal in the Finnish ways, or talking about black metal having somewhat heavy metal, hard rock, black metal, thrash metal influenced, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that Sacrilegious Impalement has always been about black metal. And the style changes are in core, summed up and all that stuff, quite minimal. And when it comes to the evolution, now of course the big question is, how would I rank these albums? What would be the worst ones? Which one would be the favorite ones? And so on. And that is kind of a tricky. Now most bands are quite simple in the sense like you get to choose like, okay, these are the worst albums by this and that band. Or some bands start strong, end up sounding weak later on, or at least mediocrity. And some bands go vice versa. I mean, there are bands which are quite boring in the beginning and later on evolve something totally different. Sacrilegious Impalement, like said, whenever they started with the demo in EP material, which later materialized in First Three Nails as a compilation, I mean, these are already good. Not as good as the albums that followed, but still. So there was no big gap big step up from the demo phase to full albums. And ever since Cult's Next came out in 2009, that is already 14 years ago, I think the band was really really good, but still quite far from being exactly great. Now, after that, the following albums like 2, Exalted Spectres, 2 years later, another 2 years later, and number 3, Lux Infera, it wasn't more like the band was stepping up. I mean, they maintained the quality, and very nicely so, but it wasn't so much like taking the band to a new level. Now, whatever happened after 10 years of not releasing albums really, that is between Lux Infera in 2013 and this 2023 album, Infinite Victor, it's almost like the band didn't, become better in quality, but more like honing the fine details. And as such, I would say Infinite Victor is, at least with fresh pair of ears and all that stuff, I would say it's the best album so far. But the difference in terms of quality is not that big. So, to give a little bit of summarizing the ideas in order that you understand what I'm really after here. I have rated all these albums. When I was doing written reviews of these albums, all I have given 8 out of 10, with the exception of First 3 Nails, 7.5 out of 10. So roughly the same, 4 stars out of 5. And of course you might be understanding hey, so what's the difference really if you're after the same score and all that? So I would say the difference is very minimal. It's more like the fine toning, honing, what do you call it? The fine details which have changed a little bit. The quality hasn't changed almost at all. I mean, like I said, the band has kept it very consistent throughout the years. And that's not something that is very common. Now, even if this band is without their 9 out of 10 albums, for me, it doesn't mean it's not a great one. In comparison, remind you of bands like Marduk. Marduk has been at its best, being out in the 5-star region. But at worst, I mean, we're talking about 6 out of 10 albums, really. So, I mean, there are lots of bands which go up and down. They have their high peaks and they have their low moments. Marduk is a good example of that. And then there are bands like Cannibal Corpse, which have always been pretty consistent, whatever they're doing. And I'd rather take a band with, say, 4 8 out of 10 albums than a band with 1 9er and the rest are forgettable. So in that sense, I think Sacrilegious Impalement has been one of the most consistent bands coming from Finland. I mean, all their albums are good, worth listening to and all that stuff, even if they are not maybe the most memorable one. So in a way, they are like Archgoat. Maybe never surprising totally, doing something totally different and becoming something like a different entity or distancing themselves from whatever they started with, but more like keeping the flame burning, not changing colors, not going with the trends, not becoming progressive or avant-garde-ish and all, but keeping it to the roots. People may come and people may go, but when you are absolutely firm and solid with whatever you have in your mind and being able to maintain not only the quality but also the style, then you're, leaving a mark in history so that the fans are yeah, I'm proud to own the whole discography and I'm proud to go back and forth. Doesn't matter whether you go for the first album or the latest album, you're always yeah, this is good. And that isn't something I can say for even a lot of classic bands. Whether we're talking about Judas Priest, or, Iron Maiden, Metallica, if you want big names, or bands like, Slayer, one of my favorites. And I can say that I want to have each and every album, because while there are these bands, big ones, or cult acts like Darkthrone, for fuck's sake, I mean, there are bands which are not consistent in quality. So that's not so much a given, even if only 4 albums in. So if I have one complaint, that is, they never did this 9 out of 10 album. Maybe they will, honing and taking this style while keeping true to a new level. Maybe they will also add some kind of lyrical content at some point when I'm absolutely saluting and all that stuff. But so far, these are the only minor complaints I cannot bitch about. But bitching about a band that's on average 4-star band, Yeah, nothing really to whine about. So in my opinion, Sacrilegious Impalement, closer to 20 years of age by now, still very, very solid. And people who have been missing out of this Finnish black metal band, I think you should do yourself a favor and give the whole discography a go. And what it's worth mentioning as a funny anecdote, I was driving my car somewhere, coming home, and whatever I was playing on Spotify while driving, ended. And I don't have the autoplay option on because I want to do full albums and then I want to go for the rest. But I was only a couple of minutes away from home, so I didn't want to, park down and, figure out what I want to play. So I told Siri, I have an iPhone, I was like, okay, play black metal on Spotify. And it was a nice surprise because I don't even remember if I had this project going or planned back then, but it was playing Sacrilegious Impalement. So of all the bands on Spotify playing black metal, it was this particular Finnish band that came out of my speaker, and I was smiling the way home. It was a funny coincidence really, but at least the music was good and not some B-level crap calling themselves black metal. So take it as you wish. Links are provided in the description box. I hope you give a go to the whole discography of the band. I think it's worth your time and worth your efforts, and maybe you will have more, different kind of feeling of the band, like which is your favorite album and which are the least favorite and all that stuff. Maybe you don't feel the whole discography as consistent and all like I do, but that's your job to find out. If I get to recommend you to how to listen to it, start with the first Three Nails compilation because that's the older material, and then go on from the first album to the latest one. I think it makes most sense going in chronological order, and that shouldn't let you down. But in case you want only one album to start with, I would say start with the latest one because it's probably the best album by Sacrilegious Impalement so far. What are your thoughts about the band? Do you already know it, or are you still a virgin about it? Let me hear your comments and drop it in the comment section. I will get back to you. Now off you go and enjoy.